back to another Commander Deck Tech. My name is Scott, and wow, do I have an interesting one for you today. So Gix Yawgmoth Praetor, a really interesting one where it essentially has a powerful draw effect and the payoff for that draw effect. So quite easy to, I guess, understand. The interesting thing is that I guess you can build it a bit in two ways. You can really focus on the first part or the second part. So the way I've built it, I've really focused on the first part, really getting in with those cheap evasive creatures in order to get that draw, and then kind of ride the victory of getting our opponent's cards, so Villianous wealthing them, and just kind of playing with that fun. So let's go through the deck. I kind of have a very strict criteria of what kind of made it as an evasive creature. So 1 mana 1/1s with flying and something else, I felt made it. And if it was a 2 mana flying, it really had to have some additional things. So Battlefly Swarm, 1/1 flying, so a bit evasive, but it has Death Touch, so threat of activation is quite nice. Changeling. Changing outcast, the best kind of unblockable, essentially, because it cannot block and it can't be blocked, so great. I Twitch, 1 mana 1/1, but it allows me to sculpt my hand a bit, so I can discard a card to draw a card, which is nice. Gingerbrute, 1/1 haste, and can't be blocked unless a creature has haste for 1 mana. Now, who's blocking with their haste creature? Probably not. So it's essentially unblockable for 1 extra mana. Prickly Boggart, Fear, 1/1 Fear, so it can't be blocked by black creatures or artifact creatures. That can obviously be on the board, but you just got to pick your opponent. Shadow Alley Denizen, a nice one where it can give the creatures that maybe have a less evasion, I can give them Intimidate, so they can't be blocked by artifact creatures or creatures that share a color with it, which is essentially going to be black. So it's pretty much the same as Fear in a mono black deck, but it's nice just to give some of those other creatures that don't have the evasion. Sturg, flying 1/1, it's great, but it can sacrifice itself to draw a card, which is nice. Tormented Soul, unblockable 1/1, great. Vampire Cutthroat has Skulk and Lifelink, so Lifelink obviously going to pay for that 1 life that we're going to use, and Skulk, not too many great Skulk creatures, is probably the best one, but it's almost unblockable, so pretty good. Vampire the Dire Moon, so Death Touch and Lifelink, so again it's going to pay for the Lifelink, and Death Touch is sometimes enough of an invasion where your opponent's not going to want to block, or it can help our defenses a bit, but it could be blocked by someone's 2/2 Necron, but sometimes you can just pick your opponent and see if they're gonna willing to throw out one of their good cards for something like this. Probably not. Bitter Blossom, so starting into our 2 manas, 1/1 fairies with flying, so has that evasion, but it gives us that token every turn, which is nice. Doughty Cutthroat, not the last Doughty you'll see, so has Shadow, so Shadow is essentially unblockable, can only be blocked by shadow creatures. This one can tap to destroy a shadow creature, so your opponent's Doughty Voidwalkers, it being a popular shadow creature, it can destroy, which is quite nice. Doughty Ghoul, when a creature with Shadow goes to graveyard, gets +1/+1, who cares, it's got Shadow, it's a 1/1, great. Doughty Horror, 2/1, can't be blocked by white creatures. Okay, your white shadow creatures, sure. Doughty Slayer must attack each turn, but again, has Shadow. Doughty Voidwalker, so this one's obviously the best of the ones with Shadow. Bit of graveyard hate, which is great. Sacrifice it, we can start casting our opponent's spells, which is nice. This one I kind of want to keep Doughty as much as possible. Normally I love to just sacrifice this, but I still want to keep this around because it's going to start replacing itself. Doughty Warlord, so it's going to be a 1/1 counting itself, but it could be a little bit bigger, but it has Shadow. Gurmag Swiftwing, so this one's 2 mana flying first strike with haste, so I did value haste a bit just because I can play this after Gix and still get that kind of it replacing itself, which is nice. Nether Trader has haste, has shadow. Those are two things that we want, and it can bring itself back, which is really great. Nezumi Cutthroat, so it can't block, but it has fear, so it's almost unblockable. Volt Scourge, so this one's flying, lifelink, so again gets life back, but it can come down for 1 mana, which is nice, right? I probably wouldn't play this if it was 2, but it can come down for 1. So Drana, Liberator Malakir, so those are all the kind of cheap creatures. Now we're kind of the additional auxiliary creatures that we've got. So Drana can help pump our other creatures, which is nice. Has first strike, but you know, flying, so it still has that evasion. Rankle, Master of Pranks, also flying, haste, so great, so it can come down after Gix, and has that additional utility of drawing us a card, getting our opponents to discard a card, or sacrificing a creature. Starscream, power hungry, right? So Starscream, very interesting, works really well in this deck. So more than meets the eye, so I can cast it converted, which is essentially what I want to do. So on the other side, it's flying, menace, haste, so you know, flying, evasive, menace, evasion, haste, great, so I can play it after Gix. When it deals combat damage, if there is no monarch, so this is the only monarch creature, so it will essentially give somebody a monarch, but with our creatures we're going to get it back. So when it comes back, it also has flying, and when we draw cards, our opponents are going to start losing life, so with Gix works quite well. So I've actually quite liked Starscream in this deck. Okay, Ink Eyes, Servant of Oni. So ninjutsu works really well with this kind of aggressive strategy. There isn't too many great ninjutsus in mono black. There's Nashi from Neon Dynasty. This one's just really great. This one's more of a flex slot. You know, you could put something else in here if you wanted, but it's such a powerful effect, and ninjutsu works really well because, you know, we've got a lot of unblockable stuff. Okay, some win conditions. So Vorpal Sword, we're swinging out with our unblockables. Of course, this is going to be great. Adds Death Touch, which is also going to deter our opponents, but really we can take somebody out at any time, which is really, really nice, right? We're trying to get to 7 mana anyway, so Vorpal Sword, 8 mana, not too bad. Great Merchant of Asphodel, Devotion is really high in this deck. Lots of 1/1s for 1. So getting that life gain is actually really nice to just pad our life total, allow us for a bit of reach, or it can end the game. Psychosis Crawler, we're going to be drawing a lot of cards, so it just kind of adds that extra reach, which is really nice. Okay, some protection, Malakir Rebirth. It's gonna, you know, people really target the Gix, so you might want to get it back, but it's also a land on the other side, so really, really nice. Sheoldred, the Apocalypse, just works fantastically with Gix. So we're drawing cards, so we need to gain that life because we're going to be paying that life, and our opponents are going to be drawing cards off each other, hopefully, if we can coerce them into attacking each other. So that's really nice. And then Whip of Erebos, I really needed lifelink in this deck. I needed to try and gain as much life as possible. I think maybe as I play this more, I might try to opt in for more lifelink or more life gain. So this one's nice. You know, you can get a creature back, but a lot of our creatures are just like 1/1s for 1. So not too much value there, but still quite nice. We need the lifelink. Okay, so ramp. I really focused on ritual ramp, not a permanent ramp that I normally would put in. So some mana rocks didn't make it, but Culling the Weak, you know, sometimes I don't have a creature that can get in, so I can just sacrifice it. We really need black pips in this deck, so that's quite nice. Dark Ritual, just great, just gives us heaps of mana. Arcane Signet gives us black mana, nice 2 mana rock. Cabal Ritual, our graveyard gets kind of filled, not too fast though, so a bit more late game-ish, but even then just helps with some of that black mana. Dowsing Dagger. Now this one I used to play in my Rankle Master of Pranks deck, and it was alright, but it would give my opponent, you know, some defenders to sacrifice, right? But in this deck, we have so much unblockable, it's really going to flip very easily, and it's just going to give us Black Lotus on the other side, so fantastic. Felwar Stone, nice cheap mana rock. hopefully gives us black. Mind Stone can replace itself. Thought Vessel helps with the no maximum hand size. You know, we're going to be drawing a lot. I didn't really put too much no maximum hand size in, just the ones that really add a lot of extra utility on top of that. So Thought Vessel, really, really nice. Creepgrass turns our swamps obviously into double, and the Extort really helps as well. Defiler of Flesh works really well in this deck, just because again we have those 1 mana 1/1s for 1 black, which is great. Does add Menace. I do value Menace as an evasion ability a lot less, but when you're already somewhat evasive and then Menace on top is actually quite nice, and the pump really helps as well, but it's really there just to use as Phyrexia mana. Grim Hireling, absolutely fantastic in this, right? We've got lots of cheap unblockable creatures swinging out at multiple peoples. That's 6 treasures a turn, and sure, it can have a bit of removal, but it's really there just to get heaps of treasures. Fantastic in this deck. Crick, Son of Yawgmoth, you know, Phyrexia mana, fantastic. Just like Defiler of Flesh, but this one's even better. Can add some lifelink. It doesn't usually survive too long, but yeah, really nice. Okay, draw. Lots of 1 mana 1/1s. Sometimes they can't get in. We can just skull clamp them. That's fantastic. Mask of Memory, we're getting in, you know, with our unblockable creatures. Where so hitting with this is really easy, and it's nice and cheap. Night's Whisper, simple 2 mana 2 mana draw 2. So really nice. Plumb the Forbidden, again, we've got a little bit of sacrifice in here, where I can just sacrifice creatures that I don't really need anymore, just to draw those cards. We still want to keep drawing cards even in other ways, not just our creatures. Sign in Blood, again, 2 mana draw 2. Black Market Connections, really nice, fantastic card. I can't stop praising this in every video I put it in. In this, we're using our life a lot, so I do try to sparingly draw a card, but you know, we want to get those cards so that we can have a huge Gix turn, but Treasure, fantastic. Braids, again, a little bit of sacrifice with some of our cheap creatures. You know, they're just going to replace themselves, so it's okay to kind of get rid of them, and you know, this usually ends up just drawing 3, which is really, really nice. Grim Horror Specs, again, a little bit of sacrifice, lots of non-token creatures in this deck, so great for drawing cards. Midnight Reaper, very similar, this one obviously with the life loss. Phyrexia Arena, another one, very simple, cheap, you know, not great late game, but early game, nice and simple. Draw us a card. Protection Racket, great for a bit of reach. Now in this one, we have lots of cheap creatures, but it's going to just get us through our deck, get rid of some of those creatures we might not need, and then get us towards more cards, right? And adds a little bit of reach. Hostile Negotiations, this is the first deck that I get to play it with. So 4 mana, essentially Mono Black Fact or Fiction, a little bit different, but just so great. Puts it in our graveyard, which is where Mono Black wants it to be, although not playing really a lot of graveyard synergy in this deck, but you just get to look at so many cards. Fantastic. Okay, removal. So I am being the aggressive deck, so removal is very targeted at being as cheap as possible. So I've got Slaughter Pack in here just so that I can have it for free. And then Defile, of course, playing a lot of swamps. Gets around Indestructible, great. Feed the Swarm, just for anyone playing like Propaganda or anything like that, you know, where we don't really want to be paying to be swinging out, so really, really nice. Deadly Rollick, free. We want to be playing Gix as soon as early. We're going to be able to switch this on. Really, really nice. Hagra Mauling, land on the other side, but a bad murder, but you know, it's a land. Lethal Schemes was an interesting one, so I don't get to play this one in too many decks, but we are going quite wide, and sometimes we don't get the attacks that we want, so we can convoke this out, or you know, they're just sitting there not really, you know, they got summoning sickness or something like that, so we can really start conniving, pump those creatures up, and start sculpting our hand a little bit. And snuff out, of course, free, a bit of life loss, but yeah, we want it to be as free as possible because we want to be dumping our hand just to have them replaced. And then Curtain's Call, nice 2 for 1, really good. And then Toxic Deluge is my only board wipe. Normally, I will play with more board wipes, but I am being the aggressive one. I want my opponents to be answering me. I don't really want to be wiping my board, but I do want to have one just in case. So Toxic Deluge is in. Okay, lands. So Blinkmoth Nexus. And there's also Inkmoth Nexus, although I don't have an Inkmoth Nexus, where these are 1/1 flying creatures. So, adds to the evasion. You can turn your lands into card draw. So this is the only creature land, things like Mutavault and things like that, they don't have evasion. This one has flying. Bajuka Bog, Graveyard Hate on a land, fantastic. Cabal Coffers, playing a lot of swamps, so of course want to convert them. If anything, this is probably the worst Cabal Coffers deck I've played, only because if I have this early it can be quite detrimental, because I'm playing 1 mana 1/1s, and this essentially ends up not being a land drop. So keep that in mind. Maybe you might want to mulligan that away, but I want to then have as much mana as I can for those later Gix activations. Cabal Stronghold, great because we're playing a lot of basic swamps. Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, Devotion is very high in this deck, so really quite nice. Phyrexian Tower, sometimes we just sacrifice those creatures. It'll be okay, we can ramp up. Reliquary Tower, no maximum hand size. It's one of the few colorless in there. Shizu Death Storehouse, probably the worst land in the deck, but it essentially gives a target legendary fear. So if I want to get Gix in, I think I've got 8 legendary creatures, so I was like, okay, well, I can utilize this a bit if I want to get some of those creatures in with fear. Strip Mind, always play a land destruction land in my deck. Strip Mine, Wasteland, Demolition Field, even. Somebody's going to be playing their Cabal Coffers, their Gaia Cradles, stuff like that. So, you really want to get rid of those. Takanuma, Abandoned Mire, just a bit of graveyard recursion. The mill, not too much, but it's an untapped black source. Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, turn all of our utility lands into swamps. And then War Room, turns our land into some draw. Of course, drawing is what we want to do. And then a whole bunch of swamps. I think 22, 23, can't remember. A whole bunch of swamps. So that is the deck. Oh, got so many swamps. That is the deck. So Gix, Yawgmoth Praetor, really interesting, very fun actually, like being really aggressive. If you're not into attacking your opponents, if you're not into, if you're the kind of person that rolls to see who to attack, it's probably not going to be the deck for you. If you're not into kind of like just seeing what happens, because the Gix activation can whiff, just seeing what happens. Your opponents are playing decks that and cards that synergize with themselves, so you're not going to get the best value out of their cards, but it's a really fun effect. And Villainous Wealth is a very popular card because of that. I don't think we're ever going to get as big as Villainous Wealth. X, I'm comfortable with X being 10, and of course more than that. You do need to be mindful of your life total. A lot of life loss in this deck, a lot. You're really starting at 30 life, 25 life in this deck, because essentially your small creatures are going to replace themselves. So do keep that in mind. Like I said, I might want to try to opt for more life gain. But yeah, super fun deck. I hope you check it out and I hope you enjoy. Thanks.